What's going on, Colton?
What's up, my man?
I mean, a storm's a brewing. The remnants of Ida is coming
right.
into the area, so hopefully we get this done with no power outages, no nothing bad going down. But
I think we should be good, dude. I think by the time this is over, then we'll be getting the brunt of this whole thing. But I think we're good for starting right now.
I know, and hey, football's around the corner. 53-man rosters, and I know the rosters that we're showing right now are not going to be completely final, but they're as close as to what we can get before week 1 comes out. And I'm pretty excited to have that football come back and the whole 9 yards.
For sure, football's back, man. Starting in a few weeks here, so I'm ready. I'm ready to go. Let's get through the AFC North, man.
AFC North time, 8 of 8 on this divisional tour, and this is the Play Action Podcast.
This is the Play Action Podcast featuring Will.
It's not every time. It's not every time.
Every time.
Featuring Colton.
The guy, if you go back into our division thing, this guy had the Jets.
I picked the Jets to win.
For no what reason?
Yeah.
Featuring a whole lot of arguing.
Playoffs, we're gonna win the division.
Listen. You need to
realize
realize my thinking process here because
No,
the Bills.
there is no
I
thinking
thought
process, Will. There is no thinking process.
Let me tell you this. Let me tell you this.
And I told people the Steelers were gonna be decent. I didn't have the Steelers like, oh, they're godly. No, I was realistic. You were very unrealistic with the Jets.
Colton,
and guess who was right and guess who was wrong, Will? You were dead wrong about the Jets. I was dead right about Goat Allen and the Bills, and I was right about the Steelers. Come on now.
That's all I thought about when I was making a Josh Allen highlight on Saturday. That's all I thought about was just Goat Allen. I'm just like, all I think about is Colton right now, and I'm like, it just puts a big smile on my face.
Goat Allen and the Bills, man. See them week 1 Steelers, so. We'll see. We'll see what Goat Allen has you. Oh my gosh, what's he going in year 4 right now? Right?
Year 4, right?
I
Yeah,
love Josh Allen.
it's crazy.
I love Josh Allen.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, episode 42 of the PAP is live, and you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Let's click on the banner here. Yeah, follow our podcast down below. AFC North time, and we got some great guests. We have 2 guests coming on. They have a little Twitter page around the 412. We got Smitty and we got Tyler. Gentlemen, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having us, number 1. Number 2, when I agreed to come on, I didn't know, and I don't see it in your background right now, but I noticed in that little clip, there was a Claude Giroux jersey. When I agreed to come on, I did not know that would be... Okay, all right, now I can see it, so I'll see you guys later. Thanks for having me on.
He is a Flyers fan, sadly. He is that guy.
All right, we're not going to talk about hockey on here, so that's fine, I guess. But anyways, seriously, thank you for having us on. We appreciate it.
No problem.
I
Thank you for
didn't
coming
know I
on.
was going to see Colton get so aggressive in that intro.
That's a cool intro, though. I like that.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I was right. How many? You guys should know this. How much of the media wrote off the Steelers last year? Seriously, they were. I mean, Coward had the Steelers 8-8 or whatever, and was like, "Oh my gosh, they're not gonna be any good." The Ravens were going undefeated. I knew this.
You know what the funniest part about was it though? The fact that they lost 4 out of their last 5, right, and kind of flamed out at the end. Those same people felt like they could take a victory lap about it. It was like, no. You said that they were going to be 8-8, not make the playoffs, just because they went 11-5, 12-4 and flamed out at the end of the season. That's not a victory lap that you can take.
No, absolutely not. Not when they were praising the Ravens going into that last year. So, yeah, okay.
But, ladies and gentlemen, you could join the comment section. We'll be featuring comments all during the podcast. So if you have any questions or just ideas or you just want to rant about something in the comments, we'll feature it on here as long as it's not too profane. I mean, you never know. So, but this is 8-8 of the divisional tour. So as we've done the last 7 weeks, we started with the worst team and we ended with a divisional winner. So without further ado, we're going to be starting out with the Cincinnati Bengals and a newly reconstructed Joe Burrow, reconstructed Joe Mixon. They drafted Jamar Chase with the 5th overall pick. What are your guys' thoughts with the Bengals going into Joe Burrow's year 2?
Why did they draft Jamar Chase with the 5th overall pick? That's what I'm going to say. Listen, Jamar Chase, great player, won the best wide receiver in college award at the age of 19. Obviously, I knew that there was going to be growing pains, and like I'm not even putting that on that pick right now. Like the slow start that he's off to, terrible training camp, terrible preseason, like throw that stuff to the side for right now. This was a bad pick from the time that they turned that card in because of Joe Burrow. their quarterback, as opposed to linking him back up with his college teammate. What they should have been doing is getting some protection in front of him, and they completely throw that to the side. By caring about Joe Burrow getting his teammate so much, they decided to not care about his health in any way, shape, or form. Didn't understand the pick from day one. Makes even less sense now.
Yeah, whenever it came to the pick for the Bengals, I remember when we were doing all of our mock drafts and everything, and I just said that it only takes looking at the picture of Joe Burrow where you can see the scar on his knee to know that they should have drafted Penei Sewell. They needed to upgrade that offensive line, and they didn't. Looking at it now, it still looks like trash. And looking at Jamar Chase in his preseasons, he has like 4 drops. I'm not saying he's going to be a bad player the entire year, but it's not looking promising early on. So I don't think that it upgraded them at all. It gave him another weapon, sure, but it gave him no protection, so he's still going to be rushed all the time, just like he was last year.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. It was on Steeler Nation live at the draft, and we're sitting there like, oh, the Bengals pick, and it was just laughing. It's like the Bengals pulled the Bengals. There was no reason. Tyler Boyd, Pitt product's been absolutely great for them out of the slot. T. Higgins comes in out of Clemson last year, hits a home run, I feel like, second-round pick. And Auden Tate, they had another guy who had there was a third receiver, came in and made some plays for them also. There's absolutely no reason to go out and get Jamar Chase when the offensive line's a disaster, and one of the best divisions in football with edge rushers is the AFC North. Why did this man get hurt last season, Joe Burrow? He got crumbled up in the offensive line against Washington. You're asking for disaster again. There's too many needs on this offensive line, and it literally makes no sense. So good job, Cincinnati, pulling Cincinnati. Being a Steelers fan, I'm totally for this and seeing them like botch this because it literally makes no sense. You have one football. You can't feed Jamar Chase a bazillion times when you got guys like T. Higgins, who was amazing last year for them, and you saw how productive he was when Joe Burrow was on the field. He went to him all the time, and same thing with Tyler Boyd out of the slot. It literally made no sense for them. So good job at Cincinnati.
And they also cut Michael Jordan. He found his way into Carolina with the other Michael Jordan, a more famous one, to say the least. But what's the expectation here for the Bengals, especially with a head coach that probably won't be there next season, and it's just going to be another kind of rebuilding situation for Cincinnati?
Yeah, I think Zach Taylor's in over his head. I mean, I think that like he didn't go the traditional route of getting to be a head coach, like the chain of command, if you will. Like he literally was like shining Sean McVay's shoes, and then they decided to make him a head coach in Cincinnati. But the thing with him is, I just feel like he's in over his head. I don't doubt that he's a good play caller. I actually think the offense could be decent if Joe Burrow has some protection. I mean, we talked about the weapons that he has. That's what we're raving about right now, even if you take Jamar Chase out of the picture. And then defensively, a lot of questions, even with the additions of Mike Hilton and company. They're not there yet. I think that they'll be more competitive this year as long as they can keep Joe Burrow upright. But I still think that they're the bottom feeders of the AFC North.
Yeah, when I look at this depth chart and I see people trying to compare the Bengals to the Steelers and saying that they could possibly compete for the third place spot with the Steelers, I just don't understand it. Like, I get that the Steelers have some issues, especially some question marks on that offensive line, but this entire unit for the Bengals is just terrible. And it doesn't matter how many weapons you have. If you have no protection, and that includes for Joe Mixon too. He could be a great running back, especially with Gio Bernard gone out of Cincinnati. He's like the feature back now. But if he doesn't have any protection, what's gonna help him any? So I just don't see any higher than fourth place for this team. And I think they're hoping you might get 6 wins out of this team. I think that's probably the expectation for this going forward.
Yeah, I think Zach Taylor should put his foot down and told Joe Burrow, we're going to look out for your health here. I know that's your buddy and all. Go see him do well somewhere else. Maybe down the line we'll bring him back into Cincinnati here. Yeah, our opportunity is to keep you healthy. I would have been like, look at your knee. We don't want this to ever happen again to you. So I'm going to get you a franchise tackle to team up with their former first-round pick, Jonah Williams. And that's what we're doing here. And that's how we're going to start off with this line. And they didn't do it. And they pulled a Cincinnati.
Let's head over to defense here. They spent a lot of money on defense. They brought in Trey Hendrickson out of New Orleans, who had an incredible 16-sack season. They bring in another guy like Awuzie out of Dallas. Now Dallas has no corners for them, and I'm okay with the defense. The defense is not bad, but it's not good. I would say it's probably the lower half, but it could be, a lower middle half, if that makes any sense. It's in the top 20. I'm not going to say it's bottom feeding like a Dallas defense, anything like that. But what are your guys' thoughts with having to stop a running quarterback, a quarterback with a deep arm, and then a dual-headed running back dual running back team that plays in the same state?
I think that their linebackers are really the weak spot of this. I think that the pass rush is decent. Sam Hubbard's a really good player. Obviously, they spent the big money on free agent Trey Hendrickson to come over from New Orleans. I even like the other two up the middle there, DJ Reader and Larry Ogunjobi coming over from Cleveland as well. I think I look at that middle of that front seven, Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, Team Davis Geither, who I like. It's not there yet. And even in the secondary, Jesse Bates, obviously, I think for my money, he's right there with Minkah Fitzpatrick as the best safety in football. But even beyond that, I mean, how's Chidobe Awuzie, who's had a very good offseason for them? How's he doing to translate for them? And as far as Mike Hilton goes, I want to bring him up just because obviously a former Steeler. I've said, and until I see it happen in Cincinnati, nobody else is going to be able to utilize him the way that Pittsburgh did. I don't think that Cincinnati is going to be able to utilize him the way that Pittsburgh did. So it's going to be interesting to see. They definitely spent some money. They're definitely committed to improving this defense. Will it happen? To be seen.
I think comparing this defense to their defense last year is definitely improved. I think the only problem is when you compare it to the other defenses in the AFC North, it just doesn't stack up. I think they've got decent players at a couple positions. And I mean, in the terms of like Jesse Bates, like somebody said, arguably the best safety in the NFL. But comparing it to like Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore, overall, this just doesn't compare. It's definitely better than last season, but I just don't think it's ready to compete in the AFC North.
No, I like the safety duo of Jesse Bates. Again, like you just guys mentioned, one of the best in the league. Von Bell comes over from New Orleans last season, does well again. Mike Hilton comes over, like you guys said, I'm not going to be the dead horse. He's not going to be as productive as he was in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh used him a certain way. He's not a bad coverage corner in the slot, but he was more used for his quickness and ability to go get the quarterback, and that's how explosive coming off the edge in the run game. That's how explosive he was and how Steelers used him. And he had a home run for Pittsburgh. He was great. Sad to see him go. They do lose Carl Lawson, who does blow out his ACL with New York, but Trey Hendrickson's really good. Same time, he doesn't have a guy like Cam Jordan on the other side of him. So how does that work out going into this time here in Cincinnati? I don't know. We'll see. I just, like you guys said, there's too many good defenses in the North where this team's going to be like, yep, they're going to be up there. I think there's a lot of question marks how guys like Trey Henderson are going to be with, not having a top player like Cam Jordan on the other side of him.
Yeah, he's the guy now for that pass rush.
Just like with Bud Dupree in Tennessee, that's a lot of questions for him. I love him. It's just a lot of questions coming in for him being the guy.
Well, let's go to the dog pound. Let's go to Cleveland here, as there's really nothing different on this offense compared to last year. Yeah, Odell got hurt, so you got to see a lot of other guys kind of move up, like Peoples-Jones and also Higgins. I'm still a very big fan of this. I'm still a very big fan of Cleveland. Now, could they recreate the success they had last year? Absolutely. I believe it. I mean, they finished third. Third place in a lot of divisions don't guarantee playoff spots. But for them, it granted them the 6th seed in the AFC, and unfortunately, they did upset your Pittsburgh Steelers in the wild card round and primetime slot. But what are you guys?
Yeah, a little low blow there, Will.
But expectation for you guys looking at Cleveland going into year number 2 of maybe another playoff run.
This is where the Steeler fans that are listening to this are probably going to turn off the show, unfollow us on Twitter, maybe block me on my personal account. I think Cleveland has the best roster in the division. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to win it by any means. The game's not played on paper, but just looking at their depth chart, and you're going to see more of this when we switch to the defensive side, because that's really where things changed for them. On offense, like you mentioned, kind of bringing back the same cast of players, minus they're getting Odell Beckham Jr. back. The big question with him is, how does Baker Mayfield play with him in the lineup as opposed to without? He's actually looked like a better player up to this point when Odell Beckham's not in the lineup and he doesn't have to force him targets. But this is a really good roster, man. And I mean, top to bottom, I would say they have the best line in football, which is crazy how they've rebuilt that thing in just a couple years. But obviously, Jedrick Wills, the first round pick for them just a couple years ago. Wyatt Teller, who's become one of the best guards in football. Jack Conklin, the big money free agent they brought over from Tennessee, and Batonio and Shredder to fill out the rest of that tier. You're just easily, in my opinion, the best offensive line in the division, and for my money, the best offensive line in football.
Yeah, I agree with you, Smitty. This offensive line is amazing for them, and I think that does nothing but help Baker out. And we know we don't really know if Baker is that franchise quarterback.
Notice I didn't touch on Baker at all, because I don't think he's really that guy. I just think he does his job well, but I think pretty much anybody could be in that spot. But I digress.
Yeah, I mean, with the offense that they have, when you have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, you don't really have to do much at the quarterback position. You basically just have to make some passes, but then hand the ball off most of the time. And that was probably the key to their offense last year, and it's probably going to continue to be that way into this year. So I think the strong running game between Chubb and Hunt, that just helps out the receivers. So I think that this probably is my pick to win the AFC North, honestly. And I know it's not one on paper, but when you look at what they did to the Steelers in the playoffs last year, I don't really know how somebody can't look at that and be like, "Hey, they already beat them." So what can you really say? Like it's not an unproven commodity at this point.
Yeah, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. You both talk about the line. I mean, it's the best in football, if not top 3 for sure. One thing a lot of people aren't talking about with this Browns team, expectations are now in Cleveland. Cleveland's been a dumpster fire. It's kind of been like they played with house money last year. Hats off to them for beating the Steelers. I think the Steelers panicked. I think is ultimately why they lost that game. But they have expectations now. They're supposed to win the division. People are handing it to them already, just like they handed to Baltimore last season. They're supposed to win it. Expectations are there. He played better also without Odell. I don't know if he has the pressure where he has to give him the ball, even though Odell hasn't spoken out, like, give me the ball. So I don't know if that pressure's on Baker, because when he's playing with just Landry and Rashad Higgins, he's been really good and is not force-feeding Odell the ball. So I don't know if that's part of the problem here. But, again, like you touched on, Smitty, not talking about Baker Mayfield, he can't win you games. He really can't. They almost botched it last year trying to throw the ball. So against the Steelers in the playoff game. They almost let the Steelers right back into the game if the Steelers don't, let Nick Chubb walk into the end zone on the screenplay. But I can't get my head around this team winning the division because the pressure's on Cleveland, and they've never had expectations. They have them now.
Yeah, you got to see it happen first. I think the question is, are they going to be like the 2017 Jaguars, right, who knocked off the Steelers in the playoffs? Everybody's like, oh, wait a minute, the Jaguars are here. No, they're not. No, they're not. This isn't lasting any longer.
You saw how fast we thought the Jaguars would be good for the next 5 years. Like, holy crap, they're going to win a Super Bowl. And how fast they sent Jalen Ramsey out of town. They got rid of players. And, yeah, it was a disaster.
Well, let's look at the defense here. And the defense, this is what you're looking at Cleveland. They bring in, big free agent people like John Johnson III. They bring in Troy Hill, both out of Los Angeles, the Rams, to be familiar with. They also, another big name, Takk McKinley, makes the 53-man roster. I'm not sure if you guys are surprised with this, but this team, the defense, I'm a big fan of the defense. It's just, will it all work? I know Clowney hasn't been good the last couple of years. He got hurt with Tennessee last year, but pair him on the other side of Myles Garrett, I think that might be a very good 1-2 kind of edge rushing combo, especially for Cleveland.
Yeah, I don't think Jadeveon Clowney is there as much to rush the passer as he is to just set the edge and be a menace in the run game, because that's essentially what he's been. Like, he has never met expectations really as a pass rusher. He's still decent. He gets some pressures here and there, but he's one of the best edges in terms of stopping the run. And I think that that's essentially the type of player that he is now. Cleveland knows that. That's what they're bringing him in to do. You look at the other additions you mentioned. John Johnson might be my favorite free agent signing, like of all the free agency for any team. So I'm very upset that he ended up in Cleveland. Troy Hill's a good player as well. But not free agency. I'm looking at the draft. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who kind of falls in their lap due to a heart issue that was, flagged pre-draft. He ends up falling into their lap in the second round. And that really hurt to see Cleveland trade up and get him because I think he's going to be a great player. I think the only question is Cleveland going to be able to deploy him in a way that, gets the best out of him? And if they do that, though, I mean, you're looking at a guy that could be a multi-time Pro Bowl and a really solid NFL player for a long time.
I'm with Smitty on the Owusu Koromora thing. When we were watching the draft during our live stream and he went to Cleveland, it sucked because we were just pissed off.
I almost shut it off.
Yeah, Steelers fans, you never want to see that your rivals have good drafts. But you can argue the Browns have one of the best drafts in the NFL last year, and it just strengthened this already good defense. And overall, I think that you could probably say with the Steelers, this is probably I would say the second best defense. I like it better than the Ravens, at least over the past couple years that the Ravens have lost some pieces on their defense. I think the secondary has really improved. My boy Sione Takitaki out of BYU at linebacker. I love that. And then I think their pass rush is really good. So overall, I just think it's just like the offense. Like it's just a very solid unit overall. And on paper, it's really, really good. But like we said, on paper, they have to go out and execute. But it looks promising right now.
Before Corner will add anything else, the only thing I wanted to add there, just because you're talking about how good this roster is, how much credit does Andrew Berry deserve for the way that he's turned around this Cleveland team? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I know it's a very small sample size as well, but it finally looks like they got a head coach in Kevin Stefanski, who I hated when they hired him because I really liked what he was doing in Minnesota for that offense. But yeah, I think, look at what Andrew Berry's done with this roster in such a short period of time. They look like, at least on paper, that they're set up to be a very good team for a long time.
Yeah, and the problem is, I mean, no one talks about it. They're getting Greedy Williams back, who was one of the top picks last year at corner. Grant Delpit, who was the number one safety. They get him, and he's coming back this year. He got hurt in the beginning of camp last year and never really played because he was banged up all season. Greg Newsome. I mean, those are second-tier corners. Those are great guys. They're probably starting on other teams. So – they're just so deep all over the place. It's kind of disgusting. And as you said, the draft pick they got this year out of Notre Dame. I mean, we're sitting here, I'm watching the draft, and they traded up. I'm like, oh, no, I already know what they're getting. That's kind of their, red flag on their defense. And it's just – yeah, Kevin Stefanski's the perfect coach for this team. It really is. When you watch how successful he was in Minnesota, Kirk Cousins isn't going to win you a Super Bowl or anything. Same thing with Baker Mayfield. But how does that Minnesota offense run? Dalvin Cook, just feed him. Give Dalvin Cook the ball 30 times a game. That's what they do here in Cleveland. They have two running backs now to do it. Instead of giving Nick Chubb the ball 30 times, they can split it, keep him fresh with Kareem Hunt. It's really scary. This team, they're deep everywhere. It sucks to say because it's the Browns. But my only thing is you have expectations. That's kind of it. See how they handle them because they're not supposed to be a dumpster fire, and we'll see. Denzel Ward, again, one of the top corners in the game, kind of had his moments last year where he struggled a little bit, but again, they're so deep, man. It's something like you can all right, I'm going to pick on that corner a little bit. Like when you get to Pittsburgh with no Steve Nelson, how's the other corner going to hand out here? Is it Sutton, Desir? These guys are loaded. So they have the pass rush where the Ravens don't. Their back end is really scary in Baltimore, but their pass rushing is a little questionable at times. Yeah, they don't have a question mark when they have Myles Garrett. It's scary. It sucks saying it, but Cleveland should be decent for the next 10 years if they play it right here.
I will say that I think the expectations for Cleveland could be met a little bit more easier this year just because you don't really have Hugh Jackson or Freddie Kitchens as the head coach. You know that they have a solid head coach going into this. At least we think so far after 1 year, which, I mean, as the Steelers fans, we know that's kind of annoying because we always relied on their head coach to just suck.
Yeah, that's for certain.
But like win totals, what are you guys looking at as like a floor and probably like a ceiling?
I think that they have a strong floor. I would say that even their floor, and this is, I mean, it's hard to predict injuries. I would say I can't see them losing more, or I'm sorry, I can't see them winning any less than 10 games, 10-7. But I don't think that their ceiling is all that much higher just because I think this division is going to be so competitive. Like even Cincinnati, I think comes away with 6 wins. So I'll say the Browns, I would put them at like 12-5.
I was going to say something similar. I think that their floor would probably be around like 9 wins, 10 wins. And then their ceiling, and just based off of who they have to play as well. I mean, they have to play the AFC North, and then they have to play their their NFC schedule as well. So I think that it'll probably be like Smitty said, 12-5. I don't expect them to go like 14-3 or 13-4. This new
17 games, man. They're
throwing me off.
Gonna actually like stop for a second and think about it. They play the Packers on Christmas.
Really?
Steelers get a benefit with the Packers with no Bakhtiari, so that's nice. They don't have to face him at all, so that's cool.
Well, let's head into Baltimore now, where they lost a big name on Saturday. J.K. Dobbins out for the season, ACL tear. I mean, there's a lot of questions right now, but if you're Harbaugh and the Ravens, do you bring in a guy like Todd Gurley? I know a lot of Ravens fans are not a fan of Todd Gurley. They don't want to do it. Do you just rock out the first couple weeks, see what you got in Gus Edwards and Justice Hill before you would just decide, okay, let's trade for a guy or let's just bring in one of the free agent guys?
I am on the Gus bus in terms of what he can do. Obviously, he's a Baltimore Raven, so I'm not a fan of his, but I am a fan of his game. I think he's a traditional downhill runner. I think just as like a pure running back, he's honestly one of the better ones in football. And I think that he's just hampered by the fact that he's, sitting behind a guy like J.K. Dobbins, also obviously losing touches because of the way Lamar Jackson plays. But I'm a big fan of Gus Edwards. I think he's a really good running back. I would not add to this room because I think that you have that receiving ability that a Justice Hill or a Tyson Williams, shout out BYU once again, brings to that room as well. So I think that they're fine there. And I think that if I played for Baltimore and I was a running back, I could run for 500 yards. Like, that's just how much I trust that scheme to be able to get the most out of anybody running the football. They create opportunities for those guys where I look at, man, and it just seems like they try to address it every year and it just doesn't happen. This receiving room. Marquise Brown, Sammy Watkins, obviously Rashad Bateman's hurt. Like, the start of his rookie season is going to be hampered already. And even when you look at it, like, even if they had the best weapons in the world, their offense just isn't designed for those guys to thrive. And whether you want to put that on Lamar, and I really don't, or if you want to put that on the offensive coordinator, and that's where I do put the blame, this offense just isn't one that thrives off passing the ball. Mark Andrews is one of the better tight ends in football. We'll see how Ronnie Stanley comes back from injury because he's one of the best left tackles in football. Kevin Zeitler was probably their big free agent when you look at that offensive line. And then let's go to right tackle for a second. Talk about Alejandro Villanueva because all Steeler fans know how bad he was on the left side the last 2 years. A good player in Pittsburgh overall, but man, did he regress fast. It just hit him out of nowhere. And really could say that about the offensive line in general, but especially with Big Al on the left side. Now he's switching sides at this point in his career to play on the right side all of a sudden. I don't like it. Don't understand why they didn't address that earlier in the draft, but here we are.
And also another name too. They brought in Juwan James, who did tear his Achilles in Denver earlier this year. He's not playing this year at all. But they signed him to a 2-year deal. So basically, Villanueva's a rental in a sense to see what you get out of James for next year.
I just think it's hilarious that they traded Orlando Brown and they upgraded apparently to Alejandro Villanueva.
They traded Orlando Brown to the Chiefs, who they're going to be directly competing with to win the AFC. That's a great move.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me. But yeah, a lot of what Smitty said, I agree with totally. I believe in Gus Edwards. I think he's a really solid running back. And I think with him is like the bell cow probably going into this season. With J.K. Dobbins' unfortunate injury, I think that could just help thrive in the Ravens offense because it's built on the run, especially with Lamar Jackson as quarterback. And with Lamar Jackson as quarterback, that's why they can't really pass the ball as much. I'm not saying he's not the worst passer in the world, but it doesn't really help. And they haven't really had the weapons in his tenure there to be an elite passing offense. I mean, Marquise Brown, I think, is a bit of a disappointment for what they were hoping for when they drafted him. They've added Sammy Watkins and Rashad Bateman in this year's draft, but still, I just don't really believe in this team to be good passing until I actually see it. So I just think that the Ravens this year, they somehow got worse, but expectations went up for them, and I just don't really understand that.
Yeah, again, you hit the head on the nail on the head there, Tyler. I'm not really too scared of the Ravens. Again, it's a division game, and you saw how tough they played us without Lamar Jackson. So it's not like we're going to steamroll the Ravens here. But Owls had a bad camp. Surprise, surprise. Was not good for them last year, the Steelers. And he's had a bad camp. That's kind of been the word out of Baltimore. He's not been good. So bringing that into a division that has good pass rushers, that's not really the best thing for success there. They do bring in Kevin Zeitler. Didn't like seeing that. But like you said, they trade away one of their best tackles to a contender. You're not getting a high draft pick. Like, I don't understand trading him away when you have 2 stud tackles for for the next, foreseeable future. I'm just not scared of Lamar Jackson either. He's an MVP. I told my buddy he's a Ravens fan when they drafted him. I'm like, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was happy Baltimore traded up and got him because, like, great, he's got an MVP. But you see what happens when he gets to those big games. He kind of shrinks up a little bit, and he can't get you out of situations throwing the ball. So, Gus Edwards, Rutgers product, really, really good. I think he's going to be just fine. I just have a lot of questions with this line getting a little bit worse. And like you said, guys, the expectations going up for Baltimore.
I always say that Lamar Jackson is a great football player, but he's not yet a great quarterback. And are we going to see him become a great quarterback? I don't know. I need to see him take that next step as an actual pocket passer. We've seen him come back in games like, that Monday night game against Cleveland where he ran to the locker room and came back out. Like, that's the first one that really comes to mind for me when you talk about that. So he has won games where he comes from behind a little bit. But yeah, if you get like a 2-score lead on them, they're really not a team that's built to come from behind like that on a regular basis. And it's because he's not that pure pocket passer and he doesn't have that element to his game.
Well, let's head over onto the defense here. I mean, Lamar Jackson, the Ravens were 32nd in the league in passing last year. I think it was just north of 190 yards per game.
Yeah, he's not scary, man. I get the legs are like kind of swoopy because it's like a video game. It's like Michael Vick in Madden, but like everyone gets you so far. As soon as you like figure where has he struggled the most? He's struggled playing against the Steelers. His MVP season, he struggled against Pittsburgh. I know we didn't play the last game of the season because I believe it was just a useless game for the Ravens, and we played RG3. But he struggles against a team with wheels. Steelers have a lot of speed on the outside where he's not able to go outside and be really twitchy and have fun trying to tackle him in open space, being a highlight reel against Cincinnati like he's been. It's again, if I'm gonna put some receivers around him, I do like Sammy Watkins coming in. Everyone playing week 1, that's kind of Sammy Watkins week for fantasy. So as soon as we get into our week 1 stats, please play Sammy Watkins week 1 because it's kind of what he does and he disappears. I do really like Rashad Bateman a lot, actually. I thought the Packers really needed him. So it sucks. Again, seeing your competitors in the North make some good selections. I do like Rashad Bateman, but I'm not scared of Lamar Jackson. That's what it really comes back to, full circle here. But yeah, this secondary that we're about to talk about is kind of scary. We'll get into that.
You mentioned Bateman, though, real quick. I have my Twitter tab open, of course. Bateman and Boykin were both put on IR, so Bateman's out the first 3 weeks for sure.
I don't mind not seeing that. That's okay. That's all right. I don't like seeing major injuries to players at all. So seeing J.K. Dobbins get hurt like that sucked. Even if he's from Ohio State as a Michigan fan, it sucks seeing players get hurt. You never wish that, and I think they're okay with Gus Edwards, but not seeing Bateman the first few weeks so he doesn't get in a rhythm with Lamar, I'm okay with that.
Well, before moving on to the defense, I just wanted to bring up, we're talking about Lamar a lot, and the Ravens are getting pretty close to having to pay Lamar. And we're talking about how he's a good football player, but he's not a great quarterback yet. And yes, he doesn't have an MVP, but he hasn't been able to be that clutch quarterback. So how do you think the Ravens are going to be able to handle that situation paying him? Because obviously I think they're going to keep him as their franchise quarterback, but I just don't know really how you approach the money amount because of his limitations at quarterback, even though he is your franchise quarterback.
Well, the Browns are in the same spot with Baker, right? And I would have more of a problem paying Baker than Lamar because, like, at least I feel like Lamar is the centerpiece of that offense. They design it around him. Baker's just handing the ball off, and he's good at play action, but it's designed around that run game. The Ravens are also designed around the run game, but Lamar is that run game. Like, he is the system for Baltimore. So I still think that they pay him as the centerpiece of the team.
And that's okay. I mean, that's great. I mean, Josh Allen got paid, so the pressure is now on the Ravens and the Browns to get it done here because it's knocking on the door. Josh Allen gets paid already. Pressure's on these guys just like it is with Carolina. Coming up with Sam Darnold as well, having to pay him. It really comes down to, like you guys said, when you look at quarterbacks, look at the AFC West. The Chargers had to upgrade. They went out and get Justin Herbert. Derek Carr and the Raiders. The Broncos are looking for their quarterback, and you know what Mahomes is. You don't want to have the third best quarterback in the division. And I kind of feel like I think Joe Burrow is going to end up being the best if Cincinnati does the right things in Cincinnati, but the problem is they're not already, so I don't know where Joe Burrow's ceiling ends up. I do think he's better than Lamar Jackson. I do think he's better than Baker Mayfield. I'm kind of excited to see what the Steelers can do here in the next few seasons because it's like, oh my gosh, these guys have young quarterbacks, Heisman winners. We've heard the whole 9 yards the past few seasons with these quarterbacks. Are any of them, top notch where it's like, holy crap, when we draft someone, are we going to be, third best quarterback in the division? I don't know. I mean, these guys are all beatable. And as you could tell, Josh Allen got paid. They're not running to pay Lamar or Baker. I think they're going season by season, seeing how these guys do. And I think it's a big year for both those guys. So more pressure added on to both those teams, with Baker having a lot of pressure, seeing Josh Allen get his money, and Lamar Jackson, again, seeing Josh Allen get paid.
Let's head over onto this defense here. That's enough Baltimore Ravens offensive talk. I can't stand it some days, but the defense, it's still a very good defense. I mean, they lost LJ Fort, who was a very under the radar signing. I believe he also did tear his ACL.
Mm-hmm.
The Ravens are banged up on defense, as you can see, but this isn't the final 53-man roster. Obviously, they're going to be switching people on and off IR the entire season because it's, as Smitty said, it's 3 weeks for long term. But I'm still a fan of this defense. This defense is still good. I mean, Tyus Bowser, Calais Campbell, Derek Wolfe, Brandon Williams, and also Patrick Queen. And they bring in Justin Houston believe earlier in August. Yeah. And the secondary as well. This defense is still Baltimore, like a Baltimore defense. When you think of Baltimore, you think of defense, and this is still a Baltimore defense. It's still a very good, 11-man core in the back here.
I don't think that there was any move that they needed to make more than adding Justin Houston, especially once the Steelers took Melvin Ingram off the market. I looked at that pass rush and I was like, man, they lost so many pieces and they really didn't add anything. Like, he's a project. Like, they took him in the first round completely on upside. He was not somebody that generated any real type of pass rush numbers at Penn State. 0 sacks in his final season there. So you're going completely banking on the upside there. Didn't mind the pick necessarily, but he's a project. So for a team that I felt like needed a starting right tackle and also someone immediately to come in and play on the edge, I didn't think it was a great pick. But Justin Houston, I think, was a great addition for me. I look at this defense and what jumps out to me right away is just the corners. That corner duo of Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey, as good as it gets in the league. I think Deshaun Elliott and Chuck Clark are one of the more underrated safety duos as well. Patrick Queen, we will see. What a mixed bag. Yeah, Jimmy Smith coming back as well. For me, man, the biggest thing that I look at is Patrick Queen year 2, because he had a huge mixed bag last year, like really great some weeks, other weeks absolutely horrible, and he got picked on in coverage. So what's he going to look like in year 2? I think that he's kind of like the X factor, if you will, for that defense if he's able to take that next step.
Yeah, Smitty pretty much summed up the entire thing. So, I mean, I just think that looking at the depth chart, I think that their front seven is pretty good. It's above average and has a chance to be even better than that looking at the pieces that they added. But then the secondary is just an elite group, specifically on the corners. It's the best in the NFL. And like Smitty said, those safeties are underrated. I think this is just like with the Browns. I think they're with the Steelers in the division. I think everybody's competing for second place with the best defense overall, at least going into the season. And I think this is competing with the Browns with that. This is maybe a little step down from the Browns when you look at this Ravens pass rush that compared to what the Browns have, but still a solid group overall.
Yeah. Who's the guy that left in free agency to go to Patriots? He got paid.
Judon.
Yes, Matthew Judon. That's it. Yeah, like you said, it was a must to fill the hole. They don't have that much of a pass rush compared to Pittsburgh in Cleveland. So that Justin Houston move was ginormous for them. We'll see what he is. He's kind of been quiet the past few seasons. I think Smitty hit the nail on the head. Patrick Queen is the X factor for this defense. How much does he improve going into year 2? Because, coming out of LSU, geez Louise, he was a stud. Again, it's just you hate seeing your rivals do well in the draft. And I saw him go to the Ravens. I'm like, oh, my gosh, I would love a Patrick Queen. Why couldn't he fall to us kind of deal? So, yeah, they're probably third best defense in the division because I have so many question marks up front with the pass rush. Geez, look at the secondary. It's gross.
I think even, honestly, Ardarius Washington, who was like a priority undrafted free agent for them, he's a stud. Like, I thought he was one of the better safeties in the class. When he went undrafted, I was like, what's going on here? And then, of course, Eric DaCosta, who for me is like one of the best GMs in football, and I'm so mad he's with the Ravens. Of course, for him to fall into their lap like that, unbelievable. But I think he's a player to watch as well. Somebody that can make a name for themselves as an undrafted guy.
Yeah, and the safeties, like you said, one of the most underrated duos in football with Chuck Clark and Elliott. So it stinks. It really does, having all these really good defenses in the division that cause turnovers. It's not like they're like a good defense where it's like, you just got to avoid the pass rush. No, their secondaries can make plays. So kind of you make a mistake throwing the ball backside and you're on the miscommunication. Yeah, it's going the other way, folks. So that's what stinks with these secondaries that we've already talked about.
And, well, let's head to Team 32 with 32. Your Pittsburgh Steelers.
Only one that matters.
I'm not a fan of the depth chart, but again, it's not the final 53-man roster. I know there's stuff's going in and out, but the big thing on this offense, I have to say, is the line. They lost 4 or 5 starters last year. Some retirement, some leaving to go elsewhere, this and that. Talk about the offense. Like, what, like, is
there a way that we can gray out those names on the offensive line?
Let's see. Let's head over to the other monitor here. I'm just gonna start, crossing them out in Microsoft Paint.
Yeah. What I will say is it actually looks like to open up the season, Chukwuma Okorafor is going to be at right tackle. Dan Moore Jr. at left tackle. Banner was put on IR today, so he's going to miss a minimum of 3 weeks. Same with Anthony McFarland Jr. as it relates to the offense while we're on that. I think Ben can still play at a decent enough level to get it done as a facilitator. He's not that same elevator of talent where he can carry a bad offensive line like he did in 2008 or anything like that. But I think he's still a decent enough player to be able to facilitate. I think he still has enough left in the tank. And when you look at the skill position players on this team and the first round pick of Najee Harris, which, we can debate that maybe that should have been spent on offensive line when you look how bad it is. But if we could, even using hindsight as 2020, go back and look, the offensive linemen that were there, Tevin Jenkins was the one people were arguing for. Well, he had a back issue. He's had back surgery already. Now his rookie season might not even happen in Chicago. So didn't mind the Najee Harris pick, especially when you have the hindsight. Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool. That's a great 1-2-3 punch. James Washington on the back burner for insurance. Eric Ebron and Pat Frymuth. I actually think Pat Frymuth leapfrogs Eric Ebron sooner rather than later. I think that was a great pick in the second round. Despite, again, them not addressing offensive line as early as I would have liked, they finally, for the first time since Heath Miller, invested in the tight end position. So I'm excited for Pat Frymuth. The offensive line, we could spend all day talking about it. Huge question marks. They're young. I like some of the guys that are there, but not for day one guys. Like, we're asking Kendrick Green, who had 4 total starts at center, to come in and potentially play center. He's not even listed as a starter right now. It's Hassenauer. I do expect that to change. But again, Kevin Dotson to me is really the only sure thing. I think Trey Turner's okay, health dependent. I think that he's just a bully. He's a great run blocking guard. But really, like, Kevin Dotson and him are the 2 things that I would say I feel okay about heading into the opener, and that's not great.
Yeah, I think looking at this offense, that's really the only concern is the offensive line, and we've talked about that all off season. I think that going into this season, that's the key part of this offense, and it sucks that it is the biggest part of the offense that could be bad. And that is the worst thing for the Steelers. The reason that Ben last year was getting the ball so quickly wasn't because he digressed as a quarterback, not necessarily. It's because the offensive line could not block for him whatsoever. And going into the season, it could be the same case scenario. They didn't really improve it that much. And we don't really know how all these guys, for the most of the preseason, we haven't really seen the projected offensive line play together that much. So we don't really know how well they're going to play. And with Matt Canada's new system, I'm hoping for the best, just because if they are decent enough to be capable for this offense, just looking at the weapons that Pittsburgh has, the offense should be lethal. I just think the offensive line is the biggest dependent on that, because it's very concerning looking at the depth chart right now and looking at the way they performed in the preseason for most of it. It's just it doesn't stack up when you look at their skill position versus the offensive line talent.
Yeah, it was a lot of questions. Again, Smitty, you hit a nail on the head with the draft. There was a lot of, it was like, they didn't really address the line as early as I expected. When there were some of those tackles that were falling back in the draft, I'm like, I know we want Najee and all, but I'm like, they might go tackle. These guys shouldn't be falling as far as they were falling. Some of those tackles that were like, oh, they're top 10 guys. You're not going to sniff them.
Well, Darisaw, one pick before Najee.
Yeah, they were falling. Yeah. I'm sitting like, oh my gosh, they might take one of these tackles, and it didn't happen that way. They took Najee, and I'm still happy about it, because it's like, oh my gosh, the line's awful. Guess what? The line, I think it's a little bit better than last season. I think losing a guy like Al helps. I think Dan Moore looked really, really good in preseason, and the fact that they got him in the 4th round, that just proves how deep the draft was at some of these positions on the line. Kendrick Green, another one. So I think their line's going to be better than people expect. But the fact that Najee Harris is going to get those, figured they were throwing on 3rd and 1s. Like, it's like, what are we doing? 4th and 1? Like, you can't get a yard running it. That's how bad it was in Pittsburgh last season for them. So getting a guy like Najee Harris, he's going to get that yard. It doesn't matter how bad the line is. You've seen him break off tackles. He's going to do the same thing. So you got to give it to him 2 straight times. He's going to get it one of these 2 times. And he's got the agility to jump over the top of the line, get it. I'm just so excited to see him. I know when I was on with Steeler Nation, we were on with Kevin Dotson for the draft. I mean, you should have seen this guy jumping out of his chair. Like, holy crap, I can't wait to block for him. So that's all you need to know, that Steeler fans are pumped to have him. And like you said, I think Pat Fryman is taking over that tight end spot. He can just do it all. And Heath, the number 2, possibly. I'm excited to see. And you saw that rhythm with him in the first game with Ben when they played.
Also, this depth chart needs some improvement, because I think Benny Snell Jr. needs to go over to the 4th spot.
I mean, I took this right from ESPN, so
this is probably yeah. But yeah, the thing too with the offensive line I should mention is it was terrible last year. So yeah, everybody brings up, they lost 4 to their 5 starters. I don't want to say for sure without watching these guys play that it's like addition by subtraction. But I think by the time that these guys find a rhythm, actually play with each other and get some repetition down, that there's no way that they're going to be worse. I definitely think that they'll be better in the run game. I'm curious to see about the pass sets, though.
Yeah, but I think that also takes off with the pass set, because they now, with this new offense with Matt Canada, you're going to see a play action game, which you didn't see at all. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. See, I'm already forgetting his name. Thankfully he's already out the door, but it's Randy Finkner. That's it. Finally.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I think the offense is just different. You got a little more explosion. I always wanted to see Anthony McFarland more involved. I know we're not going to see him the first 3 weeks. I always wanted to see him more involved in the offense, but now you're going to. He's got his college coach running the show. So I think they're going to use him because he's just so explosive. And again, twitchy. He's like Lamar Jackson. Have fun trying to tackle him in the open field. He's just so fast. And again, the offensive line's better. They had guys like DeCastro. Again, it's like, oh my gosh, he's a Pro Bowler left and right. He had 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door last season. He was banged up, so he wasn't like in the top of his game. So again, not saying that it's a big upgrade with Trey Turner, who's a former Pro Bowler, but who's had his problem with injuries as well. But I think filling that hole for now is good. And Kevin Dotson, I think that was an absolute steal of a pick in the draft last season. He had a lot of people questioning his, there was rumors coming out how his fitness was. He took that a little bit to heart, jumping on Twitter a little bit, like showing his workouts and stuff. So I think he's ready to go this season. And Chooks has to step up. Chooks had me scratching my head a little bit last season, but I do think Dan Moore could fill that hole really well for the Steelers on the line. And I thought he was a steal for a pick coming out of Texas A&M.
And let's head over to the defensive side of the ball. cryptic tweet by Joe Hayden today, last dance. I mean, I'm not sure if this means the end of the road's at the end of the season or he just wants to try following Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. But the defense is still amazing. Pittsburgh, the Steel Curtain, I like the defense. That's all I have to say. I like the defense. I'm not going to reference a bunch of Steelers stuff in here, but the defense is still a scary portion of this Pittsburgh Steelers team.
So no Stephon Tuitt for 3 weeks, along with Banner McFarland, as he was placed on IR today. But Chris Wormley, I mean, the defensive line in general, they kept the extra defensive linemen, probably knowing what was going on with the Tuitt situation. The defensive line is maybe their deepest position group. I mean, they all balled out in the preseason. Stephon Tuitt's a huge loss, obviously coming off a career year. But if there's one spot where they could afford to miss a starter for a little bit of time, it's along that defensive line. So it just means more opportunities for a guy like Chris Wormley, who came over from Baltimore. Kind of underwhelmed last year, but they liked him enough to bring him back on a new deal. So let's see what he can do in place of Stephon Tuitt, because it sounds like he's going to be that first guy up. We got to get the TJ Watt situation figured out. Just pay him. Otherwise, he's going to be making $10 million. He's still going to be there this year, but I would like to see him, maybe get in some practice time before you have to go up to Buffalo and play this football game. Devin Bush coming back off the injury. We'll see what happens in year 3. I mean, he looked like he was starting to take on that role as like the green dot communicator in the middle of the defense last year, and then he tears his ACL. So we'll see what happens this year. Obviously, the addition of Joe Schobert, I think, is going to be big for him because he's actually a guy that kind of plays a similar style. He's not like that downhill thumper that we had like in a Vince Williams or Robert Spillane would have been. He's actually a guy that can help out in pass coverage a little bit as well, where we've seen that that's not going to be what Robert Spillane is able to do. Probably the reason they go out and get a guy like Schobert. Alex Highsmith, I mean, how much time do you guys have for me to talk about him? Obviously,
however much you want.
We're big fans of him at around the 412. Him and his dad have both been on our show a couple times. You talked about the loss of Bud Dupree, and I love Bud, but man, Alex Highsmith, you talked about gems in the draft. 3rd round, 102nd pick coming out of Charlotte as a walk-on. He's carried that walk-on mentality with him. Really good rookie year. The underlying numbers were great, and I'm excited for his year 2 and going forward. Joe Hayden, you mentioned the cryptic tweet. He was looking for an extension, 32 years old. I love Joe Hayden. I'm not upset that the Steelers aren't approaching the idea of extending him, at least at this time. This is a thing that you go year by year with at this point. Speaking of going year by year with, we'll see what Terrell Edmonds' future holds after not giving him the 5th-year option. Minkah Fitzpatrick's here to stay. Cam Sutton's maybe my favorite football player on this team, maybe the smartest defensive back that we have in that room. That's all I got for the defense. Oh, James Pierre as well. Going to be, I think, a gem of a find for the Steelers. Only played 38 snaps last year, so I know it's hard to go based off that. He's got all the traits, though, man. He's Steelers' corner. He likes to tackle. He's long. He fits in the run game. He fills well. I love this kid.
Smitty, I like how you said that's all I have to say for defense. You literally just went down the line of every single
That's what I was doing, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
But I didn't touch really on the reserves. I didn't really touch on the reserves at all. I saved Melvin Ingram for you.
Oh, well, yeah, Melvin Ingram was a great addition, and it was really ensured that pass rush. I think that people were questioning, and ourselves included, the depth that they had at that edge position, and he, being very versatile, can play multiple positions and putting on the ground or standing up, and he can come from different areas. I think that it's a great pickup for the Steelers. Alex Highsmith still is going to be the starter. I hated that the second that Melvin Ingram got signed, everybody was talking about him and TJ Watt being the starters. No, Alex Highsmith is still your starter. He is so underrated, and I think he's going to have a great year. And I think that the Joe Schobert trade was a huge addition for the Steelers, just because looking at the depth that they have at that middle linebacker, you have Ulysses Gilbert III, Robert Spillane, who was going to be the starter without Joe Schobert coming in, and then Buddy Johnson, Marcus Allen. I mean, Buddy Johnson's been really solid this preseason. I think that he'll be a good secondary position for it. But I think that without Joe Schobert, having Robert Spillane and Devin Bush, Robert Spillane is ideally a middle linebacker too. Like he's not going to be a starting guy, especially with Devin Bush. So I think that really shores up the position, at least going into the season. And then another one with the depth that we were questioning was the corners. I think that the James Pierre being good into this preseason is the best thing for the Steelers because it allows them to be able to put Cam Sutton on that slot corner again and have James Pierre play on the outside. I don't really like the rest of their depth at corner, especially with them keeping
They
Justin
did bring
Lane
Arthur
on their
Millette back
53
as
man.
well. So.
Yeah. Justin Lane, I mean, there's a lot of things you could say about him. I think
That's
he's
true.
very he's very disappointing so far, especially for a third round pick. But overall, this defense, it should be the best in the division, and it should be arguably the best in the NFL. I don't really think that with the loss of Bud, I don't think that it's a huge drop off from him to Alex Highsmith going into this offseason. I just think they stayed at least the same. And Tyson Alualu, that was such a weird situation with him signing with Jacksonville, then not being able to get to Jacksonville, and then ends up going back to Pittsburgh. I think that was a really big signing for Pittsburgh to be able to get him back because he thrived in that defense at the nose tackle position. And behind him, there wasn't the same production that you would have gotten. So I think that was a great addition.
My only thing about this defense, and it was kind of just their cuts that, kind of pissed me off a little bit, is keeping useless Gilbert. I think he's useless, Gilbert, because he's never on the field. He's never healthy. They needed him big time last season, and he wasn't there. So it literally makes me scratch my head where you lose a draft pick like Roche, who looked really, really good in preseason, and you let him go. He signs with the Giants today. So that kind of aggravated me a little bit. But yeah, I know Keith Butler's kind of like, all right, we kind of need some more heads here in the secondary. And I think they're going to be doing that. I think they're going to be addressing that in the cuts happened in the past few days here. So I think they're going to jump on that. But yeah, the defense is loaded. I think you see Melvin Ingram even slide inside to help out, filling in with no to it. I think he's got the size when he can slide in to play a few snaps, to give Wormley a blow, to give those guys a blow. And you kind of knew this was happening. They kind of put Tuitt on the IR today, keeping all those guys inside. They kind of forewarned that something was going to happen with Tuitt, sadly. With the loss of his brother, he hasn't shown up to camp. And like you said, Smitty, can we pay TJ, please? It's kind of getting aggravating. Dulac tweeted out, it's going to get a done deal after the Carolina game. What are we messing around with here? Just please pay the man. He's handled it correctly, going to the games, at practice. Please pay him. It's literally aggravating. I'm going to lose a gasket here if they just don't pay TJ.
And what's the projection here? What's the floor? What's the ceiling? What are you guys feeling for this?
See, their floor, because of having a 39-year-old quarterback and an offensive line that I'm not so sure how they're going to perform at the start of the season. Keep in mind, Mike Tomlin has not had a losing season at the helm of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's also not had a 17-game season, and I don't know if he's ever had a tougher schedule as well. If you guys have seen the schedule, especially that gauntlet that they have at the end of the year. I'll say a floor is 8-9. I'll say a ceiling is 12-5. My actual prediction is 11-6.
Yeah, I think the floor. I'll go a step below that. I think 7-10. That still sounds weird. Would be the floor. I just think that there's a lot that could go wrong, specifically offensively. If that offensive line is not as good going into this season. And ceiling, I'm with Smitty. I think 12-5 could very well happen as well, assuming that they are very good. That it's both ends of the spectrum, because I've said that I think the Steelers could easily finish first in the division as easily as they could finish third, and it's just depending on how they play. Mm-hmm. But I think that 10-7, 11-6, that's a reasonable number to expect from the Steelers going into the season.
Yeah, I think it's 10 or 11. I think the floor is probably 9 wins. I saw the 8.5 number, and I'm like, yep, I call 1-800-GAMBLER. Easily they're going to get over 9 wins. It's not even a homer pick, as I called it last season with the Steelers. I think they're going to be good. Geez Louise. The depth at the outside is extraordinary. I mean, we haven't even talked about Jameer Jones. We haven't really talked about the reserves. No one wants to hear that on a podcast. No one cares about a third stringer. he had an absolute fantastic camp, fantastic preseason. I mean, geez Louise.
I think their two best camps were from edge guys. I think Alex Highsmith and Jameer Jones had the two best camps.
Yeah, I mean, geez Louise. It's just so deep on the edge, and getting Joe Sherper for a bag of chips, not even a good bag of chips either, might I add. I mean, geez, it's just they're so deep. My only question is the other corner. I know you talked highly of Cam Sutton. I know he's really smart. He looked like he got picked on at moments in preseason, and it's just like teams are going to go after him. So I don't know if they slide him inside. James Pierre had his moments as well, but I think he has a lot more upside. It's just like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of questions.
Well, that's my thing with like the floor, right? Is in a worst case scenario, say something happens to Joe Hayden, what in the world is happening with those corners? Like, and say it's a multi-week injury or it's worse than that. And like, that's how I look at a floor, is everything pretty much goes wrong. And that's just me giving credit to Mike Tomlin at that point, thinking they're still going to win 8 games if everything goes wrong.
Yeah, and that's also the way I look at it, where they somehow got 8 wins with Mason Rudolph and Ducks. That's where like my floor also turns to 9 wins, because I get the schedule's brutal, but they got a nice little break early, it looks like, with the Packers with no Bakhtiari. Have fun with that. Look what the Steelers did to the Colts when they had their tackles out. I mean, geez, Philip had no time to throw in the second half. And the fact that they have more guys and it's going to be rotational, where like TJ, like if your Cassius Mars came in for TJ and I forget the guy's name. He followed Bud to Tennessee.
Ola.
Yes.
Ola Adaney. Yeah.
And, I mean, geez, he came in, he didn't do anything. Now you're bringing a guy like Melvin Ingram in who's going to be fresh. I mean, hello. It's just – I love this defense in the front especially. Only thing that makes me scared is that other corner spot. And like you said, if Joe Hayden goes down, oh, my goodness, the word. It's going to be everything's fine here. It's like that burning like house emoji thing, like meme. That's what's going to be in Pittsburgh in the secondary. I would like to see them go out and address some of that. Wrote an article today with Steeler Nation on picking up the kid from Washington that they just cut for some reason.
Jimmy Moreland.
Yes, Moreland. So would like to secure the inside. They also might be bringing back Antoine Brooks once he, I think, clears waivers, I think is what the plan is here, and add him on the injured list, I think is what's going to go on with him. We kind of all thought he was the slot corner coming in this year. How good he looked early on in camp. It's like, holy crap, he looks great. Ben talked about how good he looks, and all of a sudden that was the first round of cuts or second round of cuts. He's gone. It's like, what is going on here? And then he's banged up. So hopefully he comes back and we'll see him 4 weeks to shape up the room a little bit. But as Keith Butler said, he doesn't like having 4 guys in the secondary. I know they bring Mollett back with the IR moves, but
yeah, I think something else is coming there.
I think something's brewing.
I think when you look at like Anton Brooks, the reason that they tried to just pass that torch to him and have him be the guy is just like size-wise and characteristics-wise, he's exactly like Mike Hilton. Play style, they were just like, here, take the keys. You're the next Mike Hilton. And, maybe he would have been, but you can't do anything when you're not able to get on the field. The best ability is availability, and that didn't happen for him, at least not this year. So we'll see if he has enough of a future. I hope he does. I'm rooting for him. But as for right now, Cam Sutton, who we tried to keep outside, put up tried to give the starting slot job to Brooks. Willett gave Trey Norwood a little bit of a look in there. Still ends up being Cam Sutton.
Yeah.
And ladies and gentlemen, that rounds out our show. So Tyler and Smitty, if you guys want to take the floor here, I'll let everyone take the floor. Whoever comes on here, talked about what they do, where to follow them, the whole 9 yards. So it's like the first day of class. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell everyone where to find you guys, where to follow, all that stuff.
I feel like this is always my job when we come onto this show, so I'll let Tyler take the floor here first.
All right. Well, you can find us at Around the 412 on all of our socials. We've got Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We do have a Facebook if you want to like that page. But no,
go ahead. Go ahead if you want.
That's fine. But then our personals, Smitty, is Zachary Smith 412. Used to be Z23 Smitty. RIP. And then mine is Weiler_Teeks33. You just switch the T and the W, and that's the more confusing of the two. But really, I don't really care if you follow us personally. Just go follow our Around the 412 page, like us on YouTube and stuff. That's what we really care about.
And you can find our podcast starting this upcoming Monday on DK Pittsburgh Sports. You can download the app. Podcast is its own separate section. We'll be right there with all the other great shows that are part of the network. We haven't done a show on there yet, so this is kind of like, I guess, our introduction, if you will, into joining the network. We haven't talked on a podcast since we made that official. And then our baby, the biggest thing that we do with Around the 412, we got our Christmas fundraiser, Rocking Around the 412, going on right now. That actually, I need to make that our pinned tweet again, because right now it's still the announcement about joining DK, but it will be our pinned tweet on our Twitter at Around the 412 with a GoFundMe link. What we do is we raise money for families in the area. Every single penny that is donated goes to buying toys, electronics, clothes, makeup, whatever for the kids of these families. And then we also buy a gift card for whatever the local grocery stores are, give that to the family for them to go out and get the supplies that they need to cook a holiday meal. So we've been doing that for the last, 3 years? This will be year 4 of Rocking Around the 412. So yeah, the mission's going on right now. You can find it on our Twitter, right to the GoFundMe. Donate if you can, but please share. You never know whose eyes and ears that you can help find that thing. And like I said, every dollar goes to, and if you donate, you're eligible to win some great prizes. A lot of autographed memorabilia, maybe like an Evgeny Malkin jersey like I got going on right behind me. So be sure to donate.
So you're telling me I cannot win a Claude Giroux jersey in this?
maybe for you. I wouldn't count on it.
It's
for you.
going to be pre-burnt?
I'll get you a baton to pass.
I love that. But Colin, talk about what you got going on.
Yeah, Personal Foul Podcast. Just edited the show honestly right before I got on here. Had former Steelers and Cardinal running back Jonathan Dwyer on the show. Great talking with him about his NFL career, what it was like playing in the NFL, playing in the Super Bowl. So I was excited to talk to him. But yeah, again, another shout out to these guys coming on. Well, you can bounce me out. See, that's it. See, Personal Foul, very simple. I'm not as good as guys as the 412 you boys. Again, shout out to you guys for joining the DK Sports Podcasting Network there. I'm glad Steeler Nation got in there as well. And Will, another big shout out to you. Big boy job there working with the NFL, editing clips on the weekend. So, boys, it was an honor talking to you guys around the AFC North. Fun talking with Pittsburgh boys about it, having someone finally agree with me on the Steelers here talking. So it was great having you guys on. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Also, I just pinned the tweet on our Twitter. So if you want to go to our Around the 412 Twitter, I pinned the Rocking Around the 412 tweet to go to the GoFundMe.
Good stuff.
And also next week on the Play Extra Podcast, the big prediction show 2021, divisional winners, the playoffs, Super Bowl, MVP, offensive player, defensive player, rookie, defensive rookie, comeback player, coach of the year. Whatever else we could predict, we're going to be doing that next week, Colton and I. So it's going to be I don't like the curse on here, but it's going to be a massive shit show, and I'm all for it because it's always fun to see how wrong we get by the end of the year.
TJ posted something on his story. I mean, Steeler Nation's absolutely going nuts right now, our group chat. Sounds like he's getting paid, so I don't want to announce that, but Steeler Nation's absolutely going bonkers right now in this group chat that I'm in. So sounds like finally we'll be seeing my main man Pots and Pans, TJ Watt.
Over 100 million guaranteed.
That's they're thinking 100 million guaranteed. So
right at 100. Okay.
So I mean, they don't give out guaranteed money, but again, blank check, Family Guy meme here. Blank check, whatever you want, sir. Give it to him, please.
And that is the Play Extra Podcast. Give these guys a follow at Around the 412. Great people. I'm obviously going to be donating to their cause. What was it one more time? The Christmas.
It's called Rocking Around the 412. Like rocking around the Christmas tree, but
I didn't want to mess it up because I kind of like throwing words wherever. Cole knows that really well, but I'm going to make sure I donate to it. And whatever money helps. I mean, that's the best part.
Yes, absolutely.
And hey, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Tune in next week. Big week next week. Hope you guys enjoyed. Everyone enjoy their night.